All right, let's take a run at this this Nick Wright guy. I'm going to bring in his audio real quick, and then let's get into it.
And not only was the decision not vindicated, his own answer undercuts it.
Wow.
He says one of the reasons we wanted to play was to clean some things up, which last time they played, this team defensively didn't look good, looked better than this.
Yeah.
And we know the offense is awesome. We know Ben Johnson has an endless supply of trick plays. Some he came up with on his own. Some he took right out of the Chiefs playbook of the lateral.
Dying to
like
do that.
which is great. And that, by the way, I was watching this game with my 11-year-old Deanna, who's kind of becoming a football fan. And I said, when you're an adult, I bet that is a standard NFL play. The throw it short, lateral for the extra yards. Yeah, I think that train is coming down the tracks over the next few years.
Pro lateral.
And it's right now defenses are so attuned. So that's great. But I don't think they needed to work on that. And what they did accomplish was the following, neither of which is positive. One, further evidence that this defense is awful. And I know if we set the line of demarcation at the Hutchinson injury, it looks fine.
Right, statistically.
And they did recover from that. Really, they dealt with it. But the last 4 weeks, once the injuries piled up, once they lost another key defensive lineman, that's what they've been defensively. And this horrible. And that opponent passer rating number is horrible. And that opponent points per game number, of course, would be the worst in the league. And the other thing they accomplished last night was guarantee that instead of going into the biggest regular season game in Lions franchise history and one of the biggest regular season games in NFL history with key guys on extra rest, they guaranteed they go into the game with the entire team on short rest. And how much does that matter? Well, the first matchup where they hit the game-winning field goal with 15 seconds left was literally as close as any game in the NFL all season. Passing yards, 3 off. Rush yards, 5 off. Third downs, giveaways, identical. Time of possession as close as you can get without it being dead even. So I just think it was a mistake. I don't think they gained anything tangible, and I know they lost tangible rest. So I think it's a mistake.
All right. Oh, I don't even know where to begin. Here, let me adjust my brim, Mr. Nick Wright. What does he say here? Let's start out with a standard NFL play. When his, what do you say, 13-year-old daughter is a little bit more grown, the hook and ladder is just going to be a standard NFL play. Is this dude just, I mean, does he smoke some of the best stuff out there? Because the hook and ladder is not an easy play. It takes a lot to go right to pull it off because the guy throwing the ball right after he's caught it has to be in a perfect position. Like everything has to go right. That is not a standard NFL play. If it was a standard NFL play, every team would be using it at least once or twice a season. Come on, dude. But why bring your daughter into the conversation about a hook and ladder play? It just didn't make any sense to me. I don't get it. All right, second statement. Further the evidence by playing, again, all the starters versus the 49ers, furthered the evidence that the defense is awful. Okay? Defense didn't have a great night. Absolutely, they didn't have a great night. Let me bring up some stats here while we talk about all this, because I'm curious. Right now, the Lions are the 7th best defense in the NFL. They have averaged 20 points or less, points per game given up against, right, the defense, the entire season. They were like top 5 for the majority of the season, like probably 85% of the games, roughly to date, 85% of the games, the Lions are right around 17, 18 points per game that they were giving up. Before Hutch, after Hutch, it didn't matter. I don't know why he brought, Hutch up as the line of demarcation. Okay, stick a line in. At Hutch's injury, that was the biggest, shoe to drop. But we've lost 13 more shoes after that. That wasn't just the only injury that we've suffered. And with every injury, the Lions ripped off 11 wins in a row. And it wasn't just because the offense was going crazy. I mean, there was a couple of 50 burgers in there. Did he forget that the Lions held multiple teams without a touchdown? That wasn't the offense doing that. That was the defense. Yeah, they might have been trash teams, or at least not great teams. But this is the NFL. It's not easy just to hold a team to a couple of field goals. So he's sitting there saying that the defense is awful. Okay, look, the defense has some holes. It does. It's not like the 49ers had a bad offense. Yeah, they had some holes too. They had a banged up offensive line, but they still had some playmakers. The Lions are down a lot. I mean, just about everybody on that defense has gone through it this season. And everybody but David Montgomery that the Lions have lost been on the defensive side of the football. All of our depth, 6 of our starters, and we still don't have the majority of them back yet. And we're not going to have the majority of them back yet. Like Alex Anzalone might be the last one. Carlton Davis, there's an outside chance. Way outside. Okay, Hutchinson injury, he says, was a line of demarcation for the defense. I get it. You know, again, that's when it started with the injuries. And since we lost to Lee McNeil, look, the Lions have been playing fairly well. I mean, they just held a couple of teams to less than 60 yards of rushing. So it's not like they're terrible. Yeah, the pass game, the Lions have been giving up some yards. But that could also just be the type of scheme that they're running. Against the Bills, we knew that was going to be a boat race. It was just whoever had a little bit of extra gas at the end was going to finish that game out. Both. I mean, why aren't you saying the same thing about the Bills? The Bills have been giving up a ton of points all season. The Lions have a separation of 200 points. 200 points this season. The defense must be doing something right. And as far as pressure and sacks and everything else, Lions are like right in the middle of the league as far as stats are considered. Defense right now. Let me pull it all up for the regular season. As a team, is what I want. All right, so right now, as of week 17, through week 17, your Detroit Lions are 22nd as far as defensive yards given up. So we're giving up about 350 yards a game. We've allowed 37 TDs this season, which if you look at, all the other top teams in the NFL, okay, the Eagles allowed 32. The Chiefs have allowed 32. The Niners allowed 44, even though they're a terrible team this year. Got to throw them in there. The Texans, they've allowed 41, and they have one of the best defenses and healthiest defenses out of all the teams. And they've allowed more touchdowns than the Lions have. The Packers have allowed 36. The Commanders have allowed 44. The Steelers have allowed 38. The Chargers have allowed 29. They may have one of the better defenses. The Ravens have allowed 38. The Broncos have allowed 32. The Vikings have allowed 33. And your Detroit Lions have allowed 37. And you know what? The majority of those, the difference here is the Bills game. That was the worst game that we've had all season points-wise. So we're not that far off from the top 10 teams in the NFL as far as how many touchdowns we're allowing. As far as yards, I mean, that's a conflicted stat because if you're giving up a ton of yards on the kickoff, they're going to have a shorter distance to go with the offense, which means they may not have to put up a ton of yards. Make sense? I think it does. Passing defense. Yep, the Lions have had a very bad passing defense again this season. They rank 31st, but they've only allowed 18 touchdowns as a defense. They've allowed a lot of yards, but you get us into the red zone and we shut you down. The Chiefs, in passing, have allowed, where'd it go? 20 touchdowns. The Lions, 18. Why is he not talking about the Chiefs? They've allowed more touchdowns than us. They've given up only 38 yards less than the Lions. I don't think that's a huge deal. I really don't. The Ravens, they are the 30th ranked passing defense they've allowed 248 yards. So they're neck and neck with us, and they've allowed 26 touchdowns this season. 8 more than your Detroit Lions. The Vikings, an amazing defense. Again, they've allowed 243.6. They're 28th. And they've allowed 23 touchdowns this season. Lions ain't looking so bad to me, right now, are they? Technically, we got a better defense than the Vikings and the Ravens as far as touchdowns allowed. Broncos, they've allowed 22 touchdowns. They're ranked 25th. Look, I'm not scared one bit of what's going to happen in the playoffs. A lot of these teams have given up a lot of touchdowns or a lot of yards. And it's what I've been saying for a very long time. Recent NFL history will tell you it's been offenses that win Super Bowls. You'd have to go back to last season where the Chiefs had a better defense than they did offense. And then you'd have to go all the way back to the 2015 Broncos where the Broncos had a better defense and a better offense. All the other Super Bowls surrounding that 15 years from then till now has been better offense versus defense. And it's not even close. It's just not. I'll get back into the chat here in just a moment. Rushing defense. Well, that's where your Lions are doing great. We are the third best rushing defense in the league. We've allowed on average 97 yards of rushing this season. 18 touchdowns. The Ravens are the number one team allowing 81.6, and they've allowed 12 touchdowns. The Vikings have allowed 88.1. They are the second best rush defense. They've allowed 9 touchdowns. So the only difference between us and the Ravens and the Vikings, and even the Chiefs, is touchdowns. We've allowed a few more touchdowns running the ball than they have. But I think you're seeing a commonality here. The teams that are really good this season, they've all sucked in the pass game. They're all doing great in the run game. You just have to find that happy medium. You have to, find what works for your team. You give us our defense from week 7 forward, and you keep everybody healthy, these numbers wouldn't even be close right now. We'd be the number one defense in the league. And I'm not even kidding. I think that we would absolutely have the number one defense in the league. As far as scoring defense, Lions are ranked 8th. Right now, we've allowed 20.8 points per game. Total TDs we've allowed this season is 37. It's pretty damn good. The Lions were up, towards the top of the league this entire season. The Chiefs, they're number 2. The Eagles are number 3. The Vikings are number 4. Broncos are number 5. So the teams that are doing well, that statistic is what matters most. And many of you that have been following this channel for a while, you know my magic number. On defense, you cannot allow more than 20 points per game. You just can't. You're going to win a ton of ball games if you can keep teams under 20 points. And the Lions have done that the majority of this season. And that is why we have 14 wins right now. We have to get this number back down if it's even possible. If we can keep some points off the board versus the Vikings, then this number comes back down. But like Dan Campbell said a few weeks ago, he doesn't care about the stats anymore. He just wants to win the game. And I think that's what we have to remember, is we just need to win the game. So my next points here on Nick Wright. Once injuries piled up, the Lions have been terrible. Tell me another team that has suffered this many injuries on one side of the football and they haven't had a bad game or two. The Lions have only had one bad game or two. Not a ton since week 7. The teams that have even come close to this many injuries are the teams that are sitting at 5-9 or 5-10 or 5-11. You get my drift here? They're the teams that aren't even close to sniffing the playoffs. Lost tangible rest. Okay, well, Nick, I don't know if you know this, but you can only rest 6 guys. So you can't just move a bunch of guys down to the practice squad and then rest, 6 guys as far as a healthy scratch and plan to get a ton of rest for your team. It's just not possible. It's just not. Now, the Lions beat the team that booted them from the Super Bowl last season, the 49ers. They needed to exact their revenge and complete the tour, which was Dallas, Thanksgiving, finally notching a win, and the 49ers. And they got it done. The Lions stayed relatively healthy in this game. The Lions are what we call a vibes team, right? They rely on the love of the ultimate competition, right? In the big game under the big lights. The Lions are 10-2. in prime time. They're 8-0 on the road. They vibing right now. They're doing fine. You don't want to screw that up. As much as a lot of us wanted to see a little bit of rest for some of these guys, more of a rotation, this game didn't allow us to do that. But at least the Lions hung in and they won a very gritty game. Another test going into the biggest test this week 18, where we've been blowing everybody out, boat racing everybody, and then this time, just like the Vikings game, they found a way to win and continue to use every asset they had to figure it out. Now, calling out the defense, well, I guess, this is not the same team it was 4 weeks ago. It's not the same team it was 8 weeks ago. The fact the Lions have found a way to win with all of these injuries speaks enough volumes to me that prove to me that the Lions have a plan. And that plan is to continue to win. And honestly, do you really think that Dan Campbell and AG feel that the defense is going to win games for them right now? I mean, honestly, do you really think that they feel that way? I think Dan Campbell does, but probably not, is my thinking. But do you think that they're just going to go tell their players, hey, just lay down in week 17. Let's kind of just get through this. We can't have any more injuries or we won't win another game the rest of the season. Hell no, he's not saying that. He's saying go out there and fight and go do what you got to do to win this game. Here's the biggest reason why I feel what the Lions just did this last Monday night was huge. We need a few guys to step up on defense, especially for the playoffs. When your guys have confidence, they play better. Kirby Joseph got his mojo going again. He picked off Purdy twice. He had his hands almost on 4 balls in this game. But again, we know one thing is for sure, that when the Lions need every player playing at their best, and when they need to have some confidence, they play better with confidence. Kirby and this secondary are really feeling it right now, and they needed that lightning bolt of confidence injected by Kirby. That was huge. Brian Branch gets benched. Kirby comes in and takes the ball away. That was huge. Totally changes the game. And then there's this guy, Craig Reynolds. He gets some action. He shows that he can and prove that he can step up. He filled in for Montgomery in a way that I don't think a lot of us expected. Played a great game. I am no longer worried about the duo there behind Jared Goff. If Montgomery can't make his way back, I think that Craig Reynolds is going to do just fine. So that's my retort. That's my answer to Nick Wright. I think you're 1,000% wrong.